The wind was a monster long before the wolf. It shrieked across the Antarctic plateau, a banshee dragging claws of ice against metal siding, rattling the windows of the Perseus research station until it seemed the walls themselves might split apart. Beyond the floodlights there was only storm and shadow, a maelstrom of snow whipping horizontal, whiteout. The kind of storm that could erase a man's footprints as quickly as it could erase his name. Inside, the world was sterile hum and recycled air. Steel corridors, flickering fluorescent lights, the muffled hiss of generators straining against cold older than history. It was here, among humming machines and trembling walls, that the crew of 9 huddled, each one both eager and terrified at what lay beneath the drill. For weeks, they had been boring into the deepest layer of glacial ice, a buried core sample untouched for millennia. Every strike of the drill bit had been a gamble against time itself, a contest with frozen history, and tonight, at the edge of the storm, they broke through. Dr. Rourke, the station's lead biologist, leaned close to the clear wall of the extraction chamber, his glasses fogging with breath. "It's intact." His voice was reverent, almost a prayer. Inside the chamber, a carcass, not fossilized, not crushed, perfectly preserved in ice, it lay curled as if in sleep, its ribs jutting like spears, its muzzle elongated, teeth caught in a perpetual snarl. At first glance, wolf, but the longer they looked, the less it obeyed the laws of nature. Limbs too long, claws too curved, eyes closed, but lids too human. The others gathered. Commander Hayes, broad-shouldered and scarred from decades in the field, kept his distance. "Doesn't belong here," he muttered. "Wolves never roamed this far south." Rourke's gloved hands trembled as he scraped frost from the surface, beneath the ice. The beast's chest was pierced by something jagged, stone or bone, it was hard to say. A kill blow, perhaps. A hunter's spear buried deep in ribs older than any culture they knew. "Think about it," Rourke whispered. "Predator preserved in permafrost. DNA untouched. Do you realize what this means?" The storm thundered outside as if the continent itself groaned in warning. But curiosity gnawed stronger than fear. They worked through the night to thaw the chamber. Heaters hummed, warm mist clung to the glass. Slowly, steadily, ice turned to water, revealing more of the body beneath. The thing's paw, curled into a frozen claw, slackened as if in relief. A fang gleamed wetly under fluorescent lights. Then, just before dawn, something impossible happened. The ice cracked open around its chest, not from the heaters, not from human hands. A fissure spread across the ribcage, like a breath pressing outward from within. "Did you see that?" whispered Alvarez, the mechanic, backing away. No. It's just thermal expansion," Rourke said quickly, though his voice shook. "That's all." But in the puddle forming beneath the body, a droplet of dark, viscous red seeped out, blood fresh. Thick as if it had never frozen, it bled into the snow like ink into paper. And somewhere in the gale outside, carried through the storm like a phantom, came the echo of a howl, not wolf, not man, something between, something ancient. The floodlights flickered. Generators groaned. The thing in the ice was no longer a carcass. It was a prisoner, and the prison was melting. The ice doesn't just preserve the past, it releases it. The storm did not pass. By morning it had worsened, winds shrieking at 100 knots, snow hurling sideways like shards of glass. The Perseus research station stood isolated, a metal coffin half buried in drifts. Flight paths were grounded. Satellites blinked out behind cloud cover. Radios hissed with static. There would be no evacuation, no outside contact. They were cut off, 9 souls alone at the bottom of the world. Commander Hayes gathered the crew in the mess hall, his voice gravel thick, steady despite the fear lurking behind every eye. "Listen up. Power cells are holding. Supplies are rationed for 3 months, but we'll stretch if we need to. No one goes outside until the storm breaks. That's not a suggestion, that's survival." He paused, looking at the dripping chamber still thawing in the adjacent lab, its contents half shrouded in mist. "And no one touches that thing until I say otherwise." Rourke bristled, his hands clenched white around a coffee mug. "Commander, we can't just let it sit there. This is a once-in-history discovery. Its tissue is viable. I need to sequence it, study it before." He hesitated, licking his lips, "before anything degrades." Hayes cut him a look sharp as a knife. Before it wakes up, you mean? The room went quiet, somewhere in the vents. A metallic clang echoed. Everyone froze. The sound died quickly, but it left the kind of silence that weighs heavier than noise. The crew. They were 9 souls stranded at the bottom of the world. Commander Hayes, soldier turned expedition leader, scar down his jaw like a history lesson in violence. Dr. Rourke, the biologist, fanatic gleam in his eyes whenever science whispered secrets. Alvarez, the mechanic, grease-stained muttering prayers in Spanish when storms grew bad. Mason, the medic, chain-smoker, humor dark as tar, always a flask in his pocket. Nguyen, communications officer, quiet, sharp, always fiddling with radio arrays like prayer beads. Carter, geologist, rational to the point of arrogance, voice always brimming with disbelief. Petrov, cook and quartermaster, ex-miner, hands built for hammers, eyes like winter steel. Shields, junior tech, youngest of the crew, hair always falling into nervous eyes. Vera, climatologist, calm, analytical, always with a notebook, recording even the weather's whispers. 9 people, 9 lives, 9 possible victims. First signs that night the storm worsened. Windows rattled in their frames, steel siding shivered. In the lab, heaters dripped condensation down glass walls. Fogging the view of the beast, Vera sat up late in the observation deck. Watching the ice fields vanish behind the storm, she heard it then. Low, distant, not the wind, something deeper. A moan threaded with hunger. She wrote it in her notebook, though she dared not say it aloud. Meanwhile, Alvarez patrolled the halls, flashlight beam cutting through dim corridors. He froze when he found it. Paw prints in the snow that had drifted in through the airlock. Not fresh, not old, huge, 5-toed, claws gouging grooves into steel plates. He bent close, touched one with a gloved hand. The snow melted into liquid warmth. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. The paranoia meals became tense. Forks clinked too loud. Conversations died too quick. Everyone glanced at the lab door when the generators faltered and lights dimmed. Look, Carter snapped one night, slamming his notebook down. We're all letting our imaginations run wild. It's a frozen carcass, nothing more. These noises, these prints, it's the storm. Stress, cabin fever doesn't bleed. Mason muttered, smoke curling from his lips. He hadn't slept in 2 days, eyes bloodshot. Nguyen spoke then, softly. The radio picked something up last night. Everyone turned through the static, a sound like a howl. The silence after was worse than the storm. The watch commander Hayes assigned a watch rotation, 2 at a time, armed, patrolling halls every 2 hours. The base had rifles, flare guns, ice axes, tools for survival, tools for war, Rourke protested, his voice trembling with manic energy. We're scientists, not guards. The specimen, it's not a specimen. Hayes barked, it's a threat from then on. Eyes lingered longer on shadows. Every hiss of steam became breath. Every clang of pipes became claws. The intrusion on the 3rd night. Shields awoke to scratching in the vents. Not rats. There were no rats here. Metal groaned as if dragged from the inside. He pressed his ear to the wall. The sound was coming closer. He ran to Hayes, shaking, barely able to speak. The commander dismissed it at first, until the power flickered and alarms blared. One of the motion sensors in the supply wing tripped. The storm howled outside, and something else howled within. The alarms were shrill enough to peel the skin from thought. Red strobes cracked the corridor into frames, light, shadow, like a bad dream spliced wrong. Mason sprinted with his medkit slamming his hip. Hayes thundered beside him, rifle up. Jaw set in that old soldier way that says I've already buried this night, even if it isn't dead yet. They burst into the lab. Steam fogged the glass of the thaw chamber. The slab inside was empty, straps snapped, buckles twisted. The melted slush on the floor was churned into a dark slurry. Rourke? Hayes barked. He didn't ask. He hunted the name. A noise answered that wasn't quite language. Wet, low. A gurgle caught between pleading and hunger. It came from behind the partition where the decontamination shower hissed. Mason reached first. Hand out, Doc. Talk to me, Doctor. Rourke stumbled into view. His eyes were night bright, pupils blown wide. His jaw trembled as if something inside it was trying to yawn larger than human bone allowed. Blood freckled his lab coat, blooming like rust in snow. I think I'm allergic, he tried to joke, voice ragged. Something got into my glove when He didn't finish. His fingertips arched into claws with a soft crack like knuckles popping, except the sound didn't stop. It rolled up his hands, wrists, forearms, tendons twanging, bones rethreading beneath skin that went tight and glossy. Then split Mason lurched forward on instinct. Hayes dragged him back by the collar. No, Rourke fell to his knees. His spine rippled like a trapped serpent. The first howl crawled out of him. Small and strangled, a newborn sound, then another, larger. His teeth lengthened like knives drawn slow, tearing his gums. Blood drooled and smoked on the cold tile. Hair threaded his cheeks, throat, chest, coarse, frost-dark, each strand erect as if electrified. "Make it stop," Rourke said, or tried. The words could not fit the mouth he no longer owned. They broke apart and came out as snarls and vowels welded wrong. The chamber glass behind them boomed as the storm threw its weight against the building. The fluorescent lights hummed like gnats at a carcass. In that bleached glare, the transformation completed its war. Rourke's shoulders tore his coat, his legs buckled backward with a tendon-snapping twang, knees hinging where no knee should bend. His eyes, God, his eyes did not fully leave. They remained human for one heartbeat too long. Blue and panicked in a field of yellow heat, and then the wolf took them. When he stood, if that word could still house what rose, he almost brushed the ceiling. He breathed like a steam engine. "Claws scored silver lines in the floor, Rourke," Mason whispered, as if a name could anchor a soul already dark water. The beast turned, its nostrils flared. It smelled grief, fear, nicotine, old battles. It smiled a dog's knife smile. Hayes fired first. The shot punched the wolf sideways. It barely noticed, more insult than wound. The second shot caught its shoulder. The third went wide when the beast moved. It didn't lunge. It vanished forward, a blur of fur and tendon, covering meters with a grace that mocked physics. It hit Mason. The world became red confetti. The medkit clattered, syringes skittering like spilled needles of ice. Mason screamed half a sound before the wolf's jaws closed and pulled his voice out by the roots. Hayes didn't freeze. He slammed the emergency shutter. Steel grated down between him and the scene beyond, sealing the lab in a throat of metal. He was left with the final image, the wolf's head lifting, Mason's blood raining in the strobes. Rourke's ID badge tangled in fur like a joke the world didn't get. The shutter locked with a thunk. The alarms didn't stop. They just learned new ways to scream. "Guyan!" Hayes barked into his radio, locked down corridors 3 through 6. "Carter, Vera, arm yourselves, Petrov. Get Alvarez shields with me. We hold the central spine," Static answered. Then Guyan's voice, clipped and ghost-thin, motion sensors tripping everywhere. "It's moving fast, Commander. Airlock 2 just cycled." Hayes swore. "It's going outside?" "Negative. It's in the air ducts." They looked up together, as if the ceiling might confess. Metal boomed softly above them, the weight of something powerful and sure of its hunger, scratching, then the long squeegee sound of claws dragging. Savoring the terror they wrote into steel, Hayes herded shields into the hall. The youngest tech's face was the white of the world beyond the walls. "I saw it," Shields whispered. Rourke looked at me. He looked at me. "Then he's still in there somewhere," Vera said, appearing with an ice axe in one hand and calm like a ritual. Which is worse, they moved as a pack of their own, makeshift, terrified. Human. Doors slammed, barricades built from desks and tool carts grew in panicked evolutions. Petrov handed out knives longer than sense. Carter argued with the air that science did not allow this, as if naming the law would arrest the criminal. Above them, the beast prowled the ducts, snuffing for heat, a breath for anyone who didn't belong to the ice. It found the locker wing first. Shields heard the grate buckling, the whine of screws failing under patient strength. He fired upward through the vent. Bullets sparked. The metal screamed. The vent cover exploded outward, and a wet nose pushed through, slavering strings gleaming like spun glass in the red light. "Back!" Hayes roared. He didn't need the word. Fear already taught it. They fell back in a tight retreat toward the central spine, where bulkheads could crosslock. The wolf didn't follow all the way. It withdrew into the guts of the station, a god content with temple rafters. It was learning the shape of its cage, and it was learning they were keys. In the brief hush that followed, a whisper seemed to move the air itself, the voice of the storm suddenly intimate, as if the bass leaned close to speak. "Subscribe before the next full moon, or face the cold alone." No one heard it with ears, but every heart did. Hayes found his voice again. "We are not prey," he said to the frightened faces. "We are 9 against 1. We seal the vents, we bait it, we kill it." He glanced toward the sealed lab, where Mason's blood still misted the glass in drying fans. For him, they echoed, some strong, some hollow. The generators hiccuped, the lights dimmed to a breathing glow. Somewhere in the old bones of the base, Rourke, what had worn his name, laughed. A harsh panting that almost passed for mirth. Outside, the storm grinned with 100,000 teeth of ice. Inside, something older than man practiced breathing through another man's lungs and found it sweet. They had hours until exhaustion made mistakes. The beast had forever, they began to hunt anyway. The map of Perseus Station was a cross of corridors and modules, a geometry meant for science, not war, but war does not ask permission. It rents any room. They started with the vents. Petrov dragged up sheets of expanded metal mesh and riveted them over grates while Alvarez threaded rebar like ribs. Welding points that sparked and hissed, gold fire falling in the red gloom. Shields taped seams with foil and a prayer. Vera marked each finished vent with a slashed X. "Like exercising windows won't hold long," Alvarez muttered, "but it'll force it to choose where to break." "Good," Hayes said. "Predictable monsters die easier." They set bait in the supply wing, a stack of rations torn open, meat thawing on a tray, Mason's flask emptied across the floor to smudge the air with human salt. Hayes hated that part, the littering of their dead friend. But hate is just a knife you turn in your own hand unless you make it useful. Guyon hovered over the security panel, watching motion pips creep and vanish across a map of blue corridors. "It's testing us. It runs the length. Stops, backs up like it's reading the building." "It's reading us," Vera said. "Figure out the pulse of the herd. Which one limps?" Carter licked dry lips. "We're not animals." "Everything is an animal," Petrov said softly, not looking up from the welder. "The difference is what we worship." The plan, thin as the air, went like this. Seal the ducts. Force the wolf to ground. Slow it with flares and flashbangs. Corral it toward the central spine. Then into the cargo lock. Heavy doors, independent power, and vent the lock to the storm. If the cold didn't kill it, they'd have a clean shot through the glass. "You're assuming it breathes like we do," Carter said. "I'm assuming it dies like anything that bleeds." Hayes said, "And we know it bleeds." They moved. Alvarez and Shields took the East Hall with a coil of wire and a bucket of nails. Born sabotage. Vera flanked them, eyes on shadows, Gripshaw on the ice axe. Mason's absence walked with them like a new draft under every door. The deeper they went, the more the storm's voice faded. The station had long bones. In the belly of it, you could forget the world. Their flashlights tunneled ahead. Red strobes fell away behind, swallowed by the dark like pebbles thrown down a well. They reached the bait wing. The air tasted of opened cans and old smoke. The tray of meat steamed softly. "Back wall," Vera said. Scratches. Shields panned his light. 4 long grooves chewed the paint down to steel. Fresh, still shedding flecks like black snow. There were prints too, melting crescents. Deep as guilt, the pattern wasn't a pace. It was a dance. "It knows we're watching," he whispered. Something tapped the ceiling above them. A small, polite tick-tick-tick. They froze. The tapping moved to the left. Then right, then behind. Alvarez didn't warn. He acted. He yanked a flare, thumbed the cap, and white fire bloomed with a scream of magnesium. He hurled it down the corridor. It hit the floor, spun, painted the world in cold sun. The wolf hated the light. It came out of the ceiling with a sound like paper tearing, bent metal twisting open like a tin grin. It dropped 15 feet and landed without ceremony. Hunched, a cathedral of tendon and fur, steam ghosting from its back. The flare cut its shadow into a geometry of blades. Shields fired and kept firing, panicked. Sloppy, bullets sparked the deck, bit steel. Alvarez yelled and sighted clean, punching 2 rounds into the belly where fur thinned. The wolf folded and rebounded like a hinge with a new angle, lips curling back to show an oiled museum of teeth left. Vera cried. She threw the ice axe. It turned in the air, a brutish spinning star, and bit the beast's cheek. Blood flashed brighter than the flare. Then, dark, the wolf reeled. It hated being surprised. It hated being denied ritual, the slow relish of hunting. They ran, not away, through. They pulled it with motion like you pull a bull with red. Down the main hall, past Petrov's welded grates, past the mess where chairs lay like bones, past the observation deck where the world was still nothing but a moving wall of white. Nguyen, open corridor 7, then lock it behind us. Hayes barked into the radio, and spin up the cargo lock heaters. I want that room hot as a kiln. Make it think the cold is only outside. Copy, Nguyen said, doors cycling. Now they hit corridor 7 as the doors parted. Hayes turned, fired twice, walked the beast back with lead language. It flinched but did not retreat. Its eyes, Rourke's eyes, fractionally, residually, memorized Hayes the way hunger memorizes a scent. They reached the cargo lock. Steel ribs, big glass, warning stripes like hazard hymns. The heaters glowed dull red. Come on, Hayes whispered. Come on, you old sin, it came on. They fell through the lock threshold. Nguyen slammed the inner door. The wolf hit glass hard enough to spider it. Shields yelped, backing into crates. Alvarez grabbed the manual lever and yanked. Outer door seals blew frost as they cracked. Wind roared in. A new god joining the room. Snow tore through the gap like teeth. Pressure alarmed, sirens layering. The wolf didn't flee the wind. It leaned into it, fur flagging, eyes narrowing to knives. It was not a thing that feared weather. It was a weather that feared nothing. Not enough! Vera shouted over the gale. It's bracing! Hayes grabbed a flashbang off his vest. Down. He thumbed through. The bang bit the world in half. White light. White pain. The wolf howled the wrong note. High, surprised, it stumbled, paw skidding into the gap where the outer door bit open. Wind seized it like an accomplice. Push! Petrov bellowed, appearing at the inner door with a steel pry bar big as a sermon. He jammed it into the mechanism and cranked. The outer door yawned wider. The storm put its shoulder in. The wolf's hind legs scrabbled, claws screaming against deck plates, sparks of brief summer in winter. For a heartbeat they had it. Another inch, and the gale would take the whole of that old hunger back to the white that raised it. Then the base died, power already threadbare stuttered, gulped, went black, heaters cooled, motors froze mid-groan. The outer door shuddered and stopped. The emergency locks kicked, closing instead of opening. Because machines love safety even when it kills. Manual override jammed. Alvarez shouted, wrestling a wheel that wouldn't move. It stuck. The wolf found purchase, pulled free of the gap, and flowed back into the room with the slow certainty of a tide returning. Its head turned left-right, selecting which fear to eat first. Somewhere in the dark under the sirens, a new sound rose, a low chorus. It came from the vents, from the long bones of Perseus Station. More than one voice now. Hayes lifted his rifle. We move, he said, as if command could still command the night. We move now. They moved. The storm took back its breath. The bass learned a new song, and in the ceiling, Claus wrote a message no eye could read, but every spine understood. The hunt isn't in the whiteout. The hunt is you. They fell back into the map room, doors slamming shut with hollow finality. Frost licked the steel frames as if the storm outside wanted in. Jealous of the carnage, the crew huddled around the central table, its top littered with old expedition charts, coffee rings, and the dust of years. Their breaths steamed in the chill. The heaters had not come back online. Every exhale was a ghost. Hayes lit a lantern, the flames small and human against the void. We're losing power faster than we can patch it. The generator's failing. Or something's cutting it. We need answers. Vera's voice was low, deliberate. We may already have them. She slid a weathered notebook onto the table. Its leather was cracked, warped from cold. The cover bore the year 1903. Where'd you get that? Carter asked, suspicion sharp in his tone. Storage vault beneath the comms array. I've been cataloging since the storm started. Thought it was just another lost expedition log, until I read this. She opened to a page where ink had bled but survived. Sketches filled the margins. Wolf heads crowned with symbols, circles of standing stones under auroras, men with torches pressing spears into something that looked disturbingly like what thawed in their lab. Beneath it, words scrawled in a heavy hand. The moonwolves endure. Only pact and blood bind them. To break the ice is to break the seal. Petrov leaned closer, squinting. Seal like prison. Vera nodded. This wasn't an accident. They didn't just die in the cold. They were buried here bound, Carter scoffed, though his fingers trembled on the notebook. That's myth-making. The human mind explains shadows with monsters, wolves in Antarctica. It's a fairy tale. But Nguyen tapped another page. The radio officer's eyes were wide as he translated the cramped script. They wrote about survivors, an expedition out of Oslo. They trapped one in the caves below the glacier, made a covenant with something older, promised to keep it chained until the moon fell. He looked up. That's not fairy tale. That's a warning. Hayes ran a hand over his jaw, scar tightening white, and we broke it wide open. The room shook suddenly, not from the storm, from underneath. Dust rained from vents, the lantern flickered. Somewhere deep in the foundation, metal groaned as if the base were shifting on its haunches. Shields clutched his rifle like a child with a blanket. There's more than one, isn't there? No one answered, because silence was the only honest answer. The descent driven by grim logic, they decided to check the caves mentioned in the journal. If there was truth buried in old words, maybe there was a weapon too. Petrov led, swinging a pry bar like it was holy. Vera carried the notebook. Hayes shouldered point with rifle raised. The access hatch groaned open at their touch. A ladder descended into blackness that smelled of rot and salt. They climbed into the bowels of the glacier, lantern light shaking shadows across ice walls. Frost glittered like a cathedral ceiling. At the bottom, the tunnel widened into a cavern. Carvings scarred the walls. Spirals, moons, wolves dancing with men. Some symbols had been chiseled over, defaced as if in fear. In the center stood a stone altar. On it, the frozen remains of another beast, smaller but no less wrong. Its body was pinned with spears fashioned from some blackened bone. Its mouth gaped in eternal snarl around it. Blood had once been painted in rings, long faded to brown stains. They made a pact here, Vera whispered. Bound it with blood and ritual, promised never to disturb the rest. Hayes touched the altar's edge. His hand came away sticky. Not dust, not water, something fresher. As if the cave still bled, a sound rose then, vibrating through the ice, a howl but layered. One voice, then two, then three, until the cavern itself seemed to breathe. Nguyen clutched the lantern tighter. They're awake. The pact's broken. Shield stepped back. His boot crunched something. He looked down. A rib bone, human, cracked and hollow. Dozens more scattered across the ice. The lantern guttered. The howling swelled. And from the shadows beyond the altar, eyes opened, yellow, cold, countless. They scrambled back up the ladder. Terror their only map. Hayes slammed the hatch shut, bolting it as claws scraped the metal beneath. He turned to the others, voice iron despite the tremor in his hand. This isn't just one beast, it's a pack. And they've been waiting a century for someone to open the door. Outside, the storm howled in triumph, as if the sky itself celebrated their mistake. The hatch still rattled from the claws below when the base itself joined the chorus. Motion alarms shrieked across every corridor map. Headlights pulsing like a heartbeat gone mad. Perseus Station was no longer a shelter. It was a snare straining against its own bolts. Nguyen's voice stammered through the intercom. Barely controlled, multiple breaches, west corridor, storage wing, med bay, motion everywhere. It's not just one anymore. Hayes didn't answer with disbelief. He'd seen too much war to waste time on denial. Weapons up, lock the central spine. Petrov, on me, Alvarez, Vera, Carter, seal the infirmary wing. Shields, Nguyen, comms room, move. They scattered, boots slamming on steel. The storm outside pummeled the siding as if cheering the slaughter about to happen. The first breach, the west corridor, folded first. Metal screamed, rivets popping like bones. The welded vent mesh Alvarez had sealed earlier peeled away with contemptuous ease. A wolf poured through, fluid as boiling tar, fur bristling white with ice. It landed on all fours, then rose higher, higher, claws dripping with frost and someone else's blood from the caves. Petrov roared back, swinging his pry bar two-handed. Steel met fur and sank deep, but the beast only snarled, jaws snapping inches from his throat. Hayes fired point-blank into its chest, 1, 2, 3 rounds. Each thud sent sprays of dark blood across the wall, but the thing did not fall. It staggered back into shadow, howling to the others, the sound so loud the vents vibrated. The reply came from every direction. The infirmary wing Alvarez and Vera barricaded the doors with overturned beds. Carter shoving cabinets against the seams, the medic bay smelled of iron already. Mason's ghost lingered in every gauze roll and empty bottle. Then the ceiling buckled, frost dust rained as a vent cover exploded inward. A second wolf dropped into the room, larger than the first. Its muzzle painted red from a kill they hadn't seen. Carter screamed and fled behind a cabinet. Alvarez raised his rifle. but the wolf moved like wind with teeth. It slammed him against the wall. Claws driving through his shoulder, he bellowed in pain, wrenching a flare from his belt and sparking it in the beast's face. White fire burned fur, popping the air with chemical stink. The wolf recoiled, howling, and Vera's ice axe split the air, burying deep in its neck. Blood sprayed her face hot in the freezing room. The beast staggered, collapsing into a writhing heap. But as they backed away, its flesh twitched, knitting, rethreading, sealing what should have killed. Vera pulled Carter by the collar. "We can't kill it. We can only slow it." Comms room, Guyan and Shields worked frantically to boost the signal. Static, thick as wool. For a heartbeat, a voice cut through. "Repeat, this is McMurdo. Storm is breaking." Report status. Then the door exploded inward. Splinters of steel, screws singing through the air. A wolf forced its way inside, ribs scraping the frame, eyes burning phosphor yellow. Shields froze, terror blanking his face. Nguyen shoved him aside, grabbed the emergency shock prod from the wall, and rammed it into the beast's snout. Electricity arced blue, sizzling fur. The wolf spasmed, flung backward into consoles, monitors exploding in sparks. But the comms array went dark with it. Their lifeline was gone. The central spine haze regrouped them at the central corridor, the only place with cross-locking bulkheads. The survivors. Petrov bleeding heavily. Alvarez pale with one arm hanging useless. Carter shaking uncontrollably. Vera grim but steady. Nguyen burned from sparks. Shields near catatonic. 7 left, 7 against a pack. The walls shook with pounding from every direction. Claws raked doors. Howls bounced through ducts, overlapping in a chorus that drowned thought. Hayes slammed the final lock, forcing his breath calm. "This is our ground. They break in, we burn them." Vera flares, Alvarez grenades, Petrov. He stopped, seeing the older man slump against the wall. Blood soaking through his coat, Petrov smiled grimly. Lifting the pry bar one last time for Mason, he rasped. The bulkhead bent inward, metal screamed. One wolf forced its muzzle through, teeth snapping, eyes glowing. Another clawed at the floor panel, ripping it loose. A third dropped from the ceiling vent. Body coiling in crimson light, the corridor erupted in war. The siege flares turned the world to white hell. Wolves howled in pain, but charged anyway, fur burning as they crashed into men and metal. Grenades thumped, concussions shaking the walls. Vera swung her axe again and again, screaming raw. Petrov drove his bar through one wolf's chest. Pinning it to the wall, it thrashed, ripping him apart with claws even as he held it. He laughed as it killed him, blood spraying, the sound mad and triumphant. Shields fired until his rifle clicked empty, then used it like a club. Carter sobbed as he threw bottles of chemicals, each burst igniting with fire that clung to fur. Nguyen screamed coordinates into a dead radio, as if words alone could summon salvation. Hayes fought like a man who had seen too many wars end badly and knew this was just another. His rifle barked until it died, then his knife worked in silence. Cutting, stabbing, buying seconds. The wolves pressed harder, bodies filling the corridor. The pack unstoppable for every wound they took. Another stitch closed, another muscle thickened. Their howls became laughter, guttural and terrible. The collapse. The bulkhead behind them cracked open. More shapes poured in, silhouettes huge in the strobe light. Eyes burning like lanterns. The corridor was a throat swallowing them whole. Hayes grabbed Alvarez by the collar, dragging him toward the control room. "Fall back. Last stand." They stumbled through as wolves filled the spine, claws sparking, teeth dripping. The door slammed shut, for now, for moments. For the last breath of man before the ice claimed his story, Hayes looked at the survivors. Faces carved from terror. "We're not holding this base. We're ending it. I'll rig the charges." The storm outside howled louder. As if it approved, the wolves hammered at the door. A dozen fists of hunger. The siege was not a battle. It was the overture to extinction. The control room was the heart of Perseus Station. Steel ribs curving overhead, consoles lined like teeth in a jaw. Now it was just a coffin with switches. Emergency lights pulsed red. The floor shook with every impact from the wolves battering the bulkhead. The air smelled of ozone, smoke, and the copper sting of blood. Hayes staggered to the console, fingers slick with gore, and yanked the protective cover off the demolition controls. Wires tangled like veins, charges slaved to structural joints. He had ordered them planted weeks ago, standard failsafe for research stations on unstable ice. "He had hoped never to touch them, Commander," Vera said. voice steady despite the chaos outside. If you trigger those, the whole station goes under the ice. No one walks out. Hayes locked eyes with her. His scar seemed deeper in the red light, better buried than spread behind them. Alvarez slumped against the wall, one arm ruined, face pale as frost. Nguyen clutched the dead radio like a relic. Shields hugged his empty rifle. Lips moving soundlessly, Carter sat in the corner, laughter bubbling madly from him as if denial were the last drug in his system. The bulkhead dented inward, metal screamed. Claws raked through, sparks flying. The pack was almost through. Hayes slammed the sequence code, voice rising above the alarms. 10 minutes to detonation. Enough time to clear the tunnels if anyone wants to run. No one moved. There was nowhere to run, only storm, only white death. The betrayal of flesh shields coughed suddenly, gagging. Vera turned and froze. His eyes glowed faintly yellow. His breath came ragged. Steaming, not with cold, but with fever. His hands clawed at his chest as bones cracked. Ribs shifting. No, Nguyen whispered. Not him. Not now. Shields looked at them with one last flicker of human terror. I don't want it. His voice broke as fur burst from his skin, tearing through the thin fabric of his jacket, his jaw lengthened, lips splitting. The young tech scream drowned in the howl that followed. The others recoiled, but the transformation was fast, hungry, complete. The boy was gone. In his place, another beast rose, eyes reflecting the same storm that had birthed the others. It lunged before Hayes could fire. Nguyen was the first it hit. Crushed against a console, the radio shattered. Sparks raining as his scream cut short. Carter bolted for the door, shrieking, only to have the bulkhead finally give way, wolves pouring through like a living tide. He vanished in teeth. Hayes dragged Vera behind him, rifle up. He fired into Shields, the wolf that had been Shields, rounds punching through fur and bone. It staggered, howled, but didn't fall. The pack was in now, flooding the room. Yellow eyes in every corner, claws scraping across consoles. Teeth flashing in red light, the last stand Alvarez, coughing blood. Pulled the pin on a grenade with his teeth. He laughed through the red spray in his throat. For Mason, for Petrov. He hurled it into the densest cluster. The explosion tore wolves and walls alike. Fire blossoming, steel shrieking as panels caved. Alvarez vanished in the blast, his laughter carried with it. Vera swung her axe again and again, burying it in muzzles, necks, shoulders. Until hands bled raw, Hayes covered her. Knife and rifle both, carving through fur and tendon. They fought as if defiance itself were a weapon, though each second stole more of their strength. The console behind them blinked. 030, 020, 28. Hayes shoved Vera toward the hatch at the far side. There's a maintenance shaft. Get out. Now and you? She demanded, voice breaking. I stay. Someone has to make sure it goes. She hesitated only a second. Then she kissed his scarred cheek. Blood smearing both their faces, and ran. The wolves followed. But Hayes cut them off, slashing, firing, roaring louder than their howls. He was a man burning himself into legend for 30 borrowed seconds. Collapse, the timer hit 0. Light filled the world. A roar louder than the storm split steel and bone alike. The charges ripped through Perseus Station's spine, detonations chaining across corridors. Floors folded, ceilings collapsed, fire met ice, and both screamed. Wolves howled as the ground gave way, dragged into the abyss of their own prison. Hayes vanished in the collapse, swallowed in red light and snow. Above, the storm tore itself apart, the blizzard scattering. Moonlight piercing the clouds at last. For a moment, the Antarctic plateau lay quiet. Vast, unbroken epilogue. Vera crawled from the maintenance shaft, frost clinging to her eyelashes, lungs burning from smoke. She stumbled into the open. The silence after collapse deafening. Behind her, Perseus Station was gone, reduced to a smoking crater rimmed in ice. She staggered across the snow, every step a prayer that it was truly over. But as the wind shifted, she heard it, low, distant, a howl, not one, many, echoing from beneath the glacier, carried through fissures in the ice. The pact had been broken, the prison opened, and the wolves had not all died. The camera of the mine pulls back, a lone survivor limping across an endless white field, moonlight washing her in silver, while deep beneath the ice, yellow eyes opened in the dark. The next howl could rise anywhere. Stay with us before the ice cracks again, and for those who hunger for more, step deeper into the shadows with our ultimate werewolf horror playlist. linked in the description below. In the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them. And trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.